Good day to all. Welcome to Extreme Recap. In the wake of wiping out the one who took his significant other's life, an American resident is shipped off a jail in Russia and should battle consistently to make do. Today, we will recap the narrative of the film In Damnation from 2003. Kyle and Dark are an American couple who are putting in a couple of months in Russia for Kyle's work. Dark grumbles that her better half is continuously working and never possesses energy for her. Be that as it may, the man requests that his significant other be patient, as they will before long revisitation of their home. The woman receives a call from Kyle in Louisiana in the middle of the night, and over the phone, she learns that her husband is already on his way home. She is sorry for the manner in which she addressed him that day. Also, abruptly the lights go out. Dim figures out how to reconnect the power, and Kyle calls her once more. After hearing his wife scream over the phone, a man breaks into her home and attacks the woman. Kyle becomes desperate, so he speeds off in his car without thinking about getting into an accident. During a fight with Kovic, he hears his wife struggling to defend herself and quickly calls the police. The lady winds up having her neck penetrated and, in a matter of minutes, Kyle shows up. After going into the house, tracks down his significant other currently dormant on the sofa. As of now, the criminal who broke into the house approaches him from behind and assaults him. Kyle then pursues Kovic as he makes his escape. The man gets on a train where he recognizes the ridiculous criminal in the two, stir something up. The two men get out of the car during the struggle. Additionally, the criminal is successfully apprehended by Kyle until he is thrown into the middle of the street. Additionally, he is struck by a motorcycle. The police arrive just then. Kyle sees his most terrible adversary escape as he is bound. Days after the fact, Kovic is brought to court and the appointed authority finds him not guilty. According to Kyle's attorney, the accused family bought the judge because they have a lot of money. Kovic makes fun of the American who decides to take matters into his own hands before he leaves. One of the on-duty police officers gives Kyle his gun, which he uses to shoot the criminal. Kyle, along with a number of other Russian criminals, is sent to Krabi prison after passing the trial. At the point when they show up at the prison, the detainees are situated in single document and are before long shown something new directly before them. As a man who attempted to escape from the jail and was caught, the general then, at that point, expresses that they can attempt to escape. Be that as it may, they should be ready to endure the side effects. All of the newcomers' possessions are removed. Also, the cops rapidly figure out the thing they will take Talik orders Kyle to surrender his wedding band. Be that as it may, the man will not do as such. The cop then goes after him and afterward takes the ring. Kyle currently only owns a small photograph of his wife. Subsequent to peeling off the entirety of their own possessions, the detainees have their heads shaved and scrubbed down. Before going to sleep, they are taken to a collective cell and shown their new surroundings. Kyle views at the photograph of his better half and his psyche is attacked by gorgeous recollections, something else entirely from his world. Around midnight, Billy Cooper is hauled out of his cell and secured in one more space with Andre, where he endures the greatest amount of violence of his life. When the inmates are taken to the yard the following morning, Kyle sees Billy, who is completely injured. He then, at that point, sees Andre ridiculing what is going on and recalls Kovic's demeanor. Subsequent to being cleared by the court at that point, the American is held onto by an incredible fierceness and assaults the man. Kyle is sent to solitary confinement when Talik decides to intervene, ending the duel. He realizes that this will be his home for the next few days when he arrives and sees the sewage running through the floor. Confronted with that extraordinary odor, the man can't take care of himself, and his food is eaten up by subterranean insects. As time passes, as his chances of returning home diminish, he ultimately decides to take his own life. Nonetheless, when he attempts to achieve his objective with pieces of his uniform, the texture snaps and he can't finish his arrangement. Despite this, Kyle doesn't give up and hits his head on the brick wall. Be that as it may, notwithstanding losing a great deal of blood, he remains alive. Out of nowhere, a moth attacks the premises. Furthermore, after seeing the bug, his psyche is returned to the day a moth went into his home. The man regains his strength and decides to keep fighting when he remembers Gray. He is terrified to hear the man's screams as he realizes there is another prisoner in the next cell and tries to calm him down. Kyle punches the wall a couple of times as though to tell the more odd that he isn't the only one. The American is totally weakened and can barely stand after several days without food. He, on the other hand, decides to feed himself and fight for his life when the moth lands on his plate. Kyle is taken to a new cell after being released from solitary confinement, and Talek tells him to be careful as an inmate. 451 has dispensed with his last 3 fellow prisoners that evening. Neither one of the prisoners says a solitary word, and the detainee goes about as though Kyle doesn't exist, which makes the American considerably more dubious. In the wake of a difficult day at work, the detainees have some time off for lunch, and Kyle rests on the grass for a couple of moments to rest. Before long, one of the warriors awakens him to get back to work, and his gathering just revisitations of the prison. By the day's end, showing up there, he gets a visit from his brother by marriage who goes to the jail to give news about Dim's burial service. The lady's body has now gotten back to Louisiana and can at long last find happiness in the hereafter. The following morning, the detainees assemble in the yard. What's more, Andre, who was playing b-ball with his accomplices, tosses the ball toward Kyle. But he doesn't hit his target, so he gets into trouble with another Russian gang before a bloody fight could start. He shows up and ends the argument in the yard corner. Kyle goes to converse with Billy and inquires as to why the young fellow was captured. The man then makes sense of that he was voyaging and met a young lady. One evening, they were intoxicated. Additionally, she caused a car accident that destroyed a restaurant. Regardless of not being in the driver's seat, Billy was condemned to serve 1.5 years in jail. All at once, Malachi shows up and lets him know that he saw Kyle's case in the paper. He then, at that point, praises the man, saying that Kavik should have been killed. The American understands that Malachi has been in jail for quite a while and makes a move to get some data. After Kyle learns that Andre is a member of the Russian mafia, he uses bribes to get what he wants in that prison. That evening, Kyle has bad dreams about the day his significant other was dispensed with and begins shouting out of nowhere, "Prisoner!" He is choked by 451 with his hands, and he starts to thrash around in the bed. At the point when his fellow prisoner was practically winded, the detainee discharges him and Kyle stands up terrified. Then the detainee orders him to be quiet at breakfast. The American is shocked by the appearance of Andre, who, in the wake of spitting on his plate, undermines Billy. The man attempts to respond, however is come by Marco. In the yard later, a battle is planned to happen among Andre and another detainee. Both the detainees and the overall himself put down wagers on who they accept will be the champ. The duel commences after a series of violent blows, Andrea quickly knocks his opponent down, knees him, and the mobster temporarily loses consciousness. At this point, the battle is as of now won. Yet, Andre keeps on going after the person with practically no kindness. The battle possibly closes when the general provides the request for Talek to stop the battle. The prisoners are taken out for one more day's worth of effort in the camp, and Zach, for reasons unknown, stirs up some dust with Kyle. The guards stand by and do nothing as the two men face each other. Kyle attempts to escape the battle, yet Xerox accomplices push him back. He is then thumped to the ground and the defeatists join to stomp on him after a serious beating. Yet again the American is returned to the prison and winds up in isolation. At the point when he's there, he beats on the wall trying to speak with the person in the following cell. And the strange person howls in a frightening manner here. This time, Kyle stays there for a few days. When he is finally pulled out of that ditch, the only thing that brings him comfort is the sweet memories of the good times he spent with Gray. When he returns to the courtyard, he notices that a meal is being served to the prisoner in the next cell and wonders who that person is. His partners can barely remember him as the man is whiskery and totally unconcerned. Kyle is the target of yet another threat from Andre in the cafeteria during lunch. However, this time he chooses to retaliate. After that, he gets up and goes over to his foes. Despite his anxiety, Kyle lands a punch on him, and the two start to battle. Until Andreas' partners joined in and attacked him, the American had the upper hand. The battle reaches a conclusion when the watchmen appear and Talek returns Kyle to isolation, which is now his sole official cell in that gloomy space. Kyle has a ton of spare energy and utilizations it to fortify his body and brain. The remaining inmates are employed outside, when one of the police cars passes a mine and causes a large explosion. Billy then uses this distraction to get away, and Marco goes with him. The cut and the gatekeeper begins shooting, yet just Marco is shot and winds up passing on. In an effort to go unnoticed, the man keeps running and crosses a muddy lake. However, Billy is located by the military quickly, and when he returns to the prison, he is taken into custody and subjected to terrible attacks alongside Andre. After leaving isolation, Kyle keeps on dealing with expanding his solidarity and battling skill. His fellow prisoner writes in his diary as he watches him train hard constantly. The police officer watch him in the yard and seeing his advancement. He will be sent to fight Talik. Andre will be the target of his first duel. In that prison, his greatest foe. Everyone thinks the American will lose the fight when he is repeatedly knocked down by his opponent when the fight starts. Kyle takes a few hits to the head and is going to black out. At the point when Andrea tests his sanity and hauls him until he collides with a support point, the duel was at that point basically won. In any case, Kyle's rage makes him respond. Furthermore, with a kick, he figures out how to wreck his rival. Then the American leaps on Anders' body and nibbles his neck energetically. To divide the two, the military congregates. However, it's past the point of no return as Andre loses a lot of blood and ultimately perishes, causing the delight of many prisoners. From that point forward, Kyle at absolutely no point ever leaves the ring in the future and becomes quite possibly of the best contender in the entire jail. Which makes the military extremely blissful on the grounds that they rake in tons of cash from his wagers. In his battle against Z, Eric Kyle doesn't take a solitary blow and effectively figures out how to overcome his rival. The man gives up after being put in a headlock, and Kyle gets up. Be that as it may, Toller orders him to complete the battle, and the American is compelled to kick Z Eric in the head to take him out. Prisoner 451 notices everything from far off and feels frustrated about his fellow prisoners since he has submitted to play the messy game that wins there. That evening, Callery thinks his activities and concludes he will never again battle. In the wake of trimming his hair and shaving his facial hair, he heads to his cell. Paul also returns his visit the following morning. The man asserts that he is doing all that to get his brother by marriage out of prison. In any case, Kyle says he tries not to let his imagination run out of control anymore and gets some information about him. Billy plans to attempt another escape because he can no longer bear to live in that horrible place. Before leaving, he thanks Kyle and asks Malachi for help getting a key. Then, as the detainees watch an unrecorded music show, a steam shows up and presents herself as Kyle's new enemy. During the evening, Billy exploits the way that the military is all celebrating to observe Russian Autonomy Day, to set his strategy in motion. Nonetheless, when he goes after the pincers he expects to use to cut the bars, a gathering of gatekeepers show up and figured out how to catch him. This since Malachi double-crossed the man and educated Talik concerning his endeavor to get away. As a prize, he got a couple of boxes of medication. A detainee 451 looked into the disloyalty that evening. Once more Billy gets a visit from a steam in his cell and experiences the most over-the-top horrendous savagery. The following morning, when the prisoners emerge from their cells, Kyle finds Billy gravely harmed on the floor. After fighting to protect himself from Valley, the man asks his friend not to let that location transform him into anything before he leaves. He isn't. At long last, the day comes for Kyle and Valia to confront one another. However, instead of attacking the American ducks, he decides not to move, which makes Value even more furious. Even when he is brutally attacked, he does not move. Talik then moves toward the detainee and orders him to battle. He will suffer severe consequences if he does not. Kyle, on the other hand, declares that he will no longer participate in that illegal game. So the man is removed from the ring and around evening time has his arms bound to a metal point of support. Talik expresses that he can leave when he chooses to battle. Kyle refuses to break his promise, despite being weak and starving, and he stands for several days in the scorching sun. Malachi has barely any familiarity with the goals of detainee 451. Furthermore, gets him a jug of liquor in return for cash. What the merchant didn't envision is that that fluid would be utilized to dispense with him. The detainee then, at that point, claims he is avenging Billy and asks how the man had the option to deceive his companion. Malachi then, at that point, makes sense of that he needed to do this to get by. on the grounds that really at that time would the cops convey him the medication he wants. However, the detainee is unable to be swayed by this justification, and as he looks at the charred body, he immediately sets fire to the cruel traitor. The man recollects why he wound up there. At the point when he was as yet youthful, he was the survivor of savagery by his instructor and put a match to his space to protect himself. From that point forward, he has been detained and has willingly volunteered to carry equity to that spot. Over the long haul, each one accepts that Kyle is ill-fated to lose his life for regardless of the enduring he is exposed to. The man stays undaunted in his choice. His decision not to battle his associates moves different detainees who additionally choose not to participate in additional duels, as they can't rebuff everybody. The military loses its power and the battling reaches a conclusion, similarly as he was going to die of starvation. Kyle receives a visitation from his wife's spirit, which gives him a little bit more strength to continue living. The general expects to utilize the American to show different prisoners a thing or two and takes him to the clinic. Kyle is taken back to solitary confinement after having his injuries treated, and he talks to the man on the other side of the wall once more. At the point when he gets back to his cell, he is amazed by the appearance of mill operator. The man seems to be a monster zombie who is frantically looking for his. When the beast is delivered, it pursues Kyle and thumps him down the steps as the American is tossed out of control. His fellow prisoner goes to him not be killed in the military. Watch the assault cheerfully on their appearances as he attempts to take off. Kyle turns out to be gotten by the neck. Furthermore, similarly as he was going to lose his breath, he begins beating on a metal entryway close to him. Right away, mill operator discharges him and Kyle finds that this is the person he was speaking with the whole time he was secured in single. The Goliath then moves toward his companion, and Talek orders them to battle once more. The prisoners rebel and begin to stage a protest for an end to the fighting as the policeman fires a gun at the pair. At the point when Talek goes to shoot, the American mill lock hops on top of him and assists him with battling the watchman before he raises a ruckus around town. The man obliterates the entryway of one of the cells, and a mob breaks out. Miller holds his friend Kyle's hand during his final moments, and Kyle stays by his side until he passes away. Then, at that point, he goes to his cell to free his. That evening, every inmate was able to escape, and the two groups, Kyle and the inmates, engaged in a bloody brawl with the police. 451 leave the disaster area. Additionally, the bald man reveals that he knows how to escape that location. The pair then, at that point, got back to their cell. Furthermore, the prisoner eliminates a bunch of papers that were concealed inside the wall. The man hands Kyle the documents and declares that he has recorded all of the killings and violence that have occurred in that location over the past 2 decades. The bald man concludes by saying that his strategy must succeed. His partner must participate in one final fight that evening. 7 inmates and 1 guard were killed, and those who escaped were completely imprisoned for 2 weeks. At the point when they are let out of their cells, Kyle gets a battle against a steam. Also, no matter what the result, the general requests Talek to dispose of him so as not to take a chance with the American bringing more hardship in that last battle. Kyle gives his best since he realizes he really wants to make do to escape that place when he understands that he is losing the dual esteem. Takes a cutting edge that was concealed in his shoe and pursues his rival. Nonetheless, Kyle figures out how to avoid the assault. Additionally, the American ends the fight by striking his opponent's head with a wooden rod, resulting in the injury of another prisoner. After the battle, the American is cuffed and taken to a vehicle. Nonetheless, when they arrive, the officials are gone after by detainee 451, and Kyle has a shot at Talek's head. Nonetheless, he chooses to allow him to live and arranges the man to open his cuffs. He then returns his wedding ring and drops a car on the man's legs, causing him to faint from pain. From that point forward, Kyle puts on a police uniform and his accomplice gives him the keys to one of. The detainee decides not to leave because he or she believes they have a mission there. After that, he gives the documents to his friend and asks him to give the reports to the authorities. While Kyle tries to get through the gates without being noticed, the prisoner goes to the general's office to settle accounts with him. After getting out of that hellish place, Kyle keeps the promise he made to his friend. Additionally, Cravey prison has been closed for 3 months since he left. Will the Russians still attempt to arrest Kyle, or will Kyle finally return to his country? Turn on notifications, please subscribe for more videos like this, and like the channel to support it. Thank you very much for watching.